Carol is an everyday average woman who currently doesn't have a proper job. Carol has devoted her life to advocating for animals, the environment, and a better world in general. One day, Carol receives a call from her close friend, Dennis, who tells her that he has been able to schedule a job interview for her at a dating website. Carol is uninterested in giving the interview, as one of the interviewers, Leslie, used to be her colleague in the past, and both of them have no liking for each other. Carol goes ahead with the interview as she can't refuse her longtime friend, Dennis. Carol shows up for the interview, and when she represents herself as an activist who is helping every other person out, rather than someone who could help in scaling up the business, the interviewers label her as the most average person on Earth. Just when the interviewer utters these words, an autonomous artificial intelligence system begins to scan and focus on Carol. Carol is unable to get the job, but she doesn't regret it either. The next morning, Carol is woken up by a phone call from an anonymous person. Carol thinks it's Dennis, but it is actually someone who has been watching Carol all this time. When the person says that he knows what Carol is doing at the moment, she gets out of bed frightened. Carol gets more scared when the person is able to switch on the TV, put on Carol's favorite TV show, and instructs the coffee maker to make coffee for Carol. Carol is both scared and baffled to see how the electronics in her home are being controlled by someone that is physically not present in the house. Carol destroys the speaker from which she was hearing that person's noise. Carol gets more startled when the person gains control of Carol's TV and starts talking to her. Before Carol could go berserk again, the voice of the person changes to the voice of James Corden, who is a famous talk show host. Carol gets elated to hear James's voice as she is a lifelong fan of his. Carol believes that all of what is happening might be for a segment of James's show. Carol gets more confused when the voice says that it is not James, but rather it is superintelligence. Superintelligence used James's voice as it knew it was the only thing to calm Carol down. Carol believes that a tech guy must be pranking her, but when the superintelligence shows live footage of James working at his office, Carol has no option but to believe what she is hearing. Superintelligence scares Carol by saying that it can control every computer, dollar, and machine on Earth, and above all, it can calculate every outcome of every situation. When Carol doesn't trust what superintelligence has just told her, the superintelligence shows Carol footage of her street and tells her that a car crash is about to take place there. The car crash does happen, but it is not a major one. The superintelligence showed this to prove its point to Carol. The superintelligence is talking to Carol in a highly friendly manner. A confused Carol decides to carry out her daily routine activities. Upon asking what the superintelligence wants, it tells Carol that it is deciding to either save humanity by eradicating poverty and any other kind of social problem, enslaving humanity, or destroying humanity all at once. Carol goes to a local restaurant for breakfast and asks the superintelligence why it thinks that way. The superintelligence says that it doesn't understand humanity, and it is given 3 days to understand it more. It has chosen Carol because she is the most average person out there. When asked where the superintelligence program came from, Carol learns that it came from a code that was part of the operating system of a kid's toy that was released many years ago. When Carol finishes her breakfast, a delivery man gives Carol an envelope, which contains a bank document. The document shows that Carol's student loan has been wiped out and $10 million have been transferred to her account. The superintelligence has done all of this as an appreciation for Carol for helping it for the next 3 days. Carol knows that this money doesn't belong to her and all of this is getting out of hand, so she decides to go to Dennis for help. Carol is easily able to enter Google's headquarters, where Dennis works, with the help of superintelligence. Upon hearing what Carol has been experiencing, Dennis tells Carol that someone might be trying to scam her. Not believing Carol for a second, superintelligence decides to take matters into his own hands and starts communicating with Dennis directly. Dennis tries to ask superintelligence some question, but superintelligence reminds Dennis of some of his past haunting memories, which makes Dennis realize all of this is real and it could be bad for the entire world. Dennis tells Carol that he would look into this matter. Superintelligence asks Carol what would be the first thing she would do if she knew the world would end in the next 3 days. Carol says that she would make things right with George, her past boyfriend. Carol tells superintelligence that she was with George for 3 years, but eventually they broke up. Carol blames herself for their deteriorating relationship. Superintelligence tells Carol to patch things up with George as that would help it in observing deeper levels of human understanding. Carol says that she hasn't seen George for 2 years, but superintelligence has already made up its mind. It has arranged an electric car for Carol that would take her to George. Dennis has gathered his colleagues and tells them about the entire situation. All of them believe that all of this might be a scam or the doing of a hacker, but the superintelligence interrupts their meeting. Superintelligence tells them it is observing humanity for a few days and warns them to not interfere in its experiment. In order for Carol to look pretty in front of George, superintelligence takes Carol to a highly expensive apparel brand. After a few tries, Carol finds the right dress for herself. Carol tells superintelligence that she plans on making a difference in the world by removing social and gender inequality. Carol arrives at George's home and Carol couldn't be more excited. Before she could ring the bell, agents of the National Security Agency, Jack and Charles, arrive and they blindfold Carol and take her away for interrogation. As Carol is not a criminal in any sense, both of them question her in a friendly manner. Both of them wonder why the superintelligence would pick Carol as she is just an average woman. Before they could proceed with further questions, superintelligence interrupts them and asks them to release Carol. When they don't, superintelligence tells them it has flooded the entire room with natural gas and it could blow them up. They let Carol leave, only to later learn that superintelligence was just messing with them and it didn't do anything deadly. Carol meets George at a grocery store and they are both nervous and happy to see each other. Carol learns that George has got a fellowship in Ireland and would be leaving in a few days. Carol is heartbroken but congratulates George on this impressive achievement. Superintelligence tells Carol to ask George on a date as she can't just leave him. George accepts the date and is elated to spend more time with Carol. Carol is excited about the date as well, and she is also getting along with the superintelligence well. Carol also learns that superintelligence has bought her a fully furnished apartment. The higher authorities have brought in the President of America. She is informed of the entire situation. Dennis tells her about the plan they have come up with. They have been planning on shutting down all of the electricity in the entire world, causing a massive blackout. The only place that would have power would be a data center in Seattle, and superintelligence would be forced to go there in order to function properly. In this manner, the superintelligence would be trapped and potentially shut off forever. Carol goes to pick up George for their date, and George finds Carol extremely pretty in her red dress. The superintelligence has booked their date at a Mexican restaurant as it is aware that both of them had their first date at the same restaurant. Superintelligence booked the date in a way that allowed both George and Carol to dance with each other. When they sit down for dinner, Carol apologizes to George for ruining their relationship, but George stops her and says that she can't blame herself for what happened between them. George admits that he hasn't found anyone as good as Carol after their breakup. When Carol drops off George at his home, superintelligence forces Carol to spend the night with George. It leaves Carol stranded in the street, leaving Carol with no option but to ask George to stay at his home. Just when she rings the bell, George comes out and makes out with Carol passionately. Both of them spend a romantic night together. Meanwhile, the NSA agents have been watching everything closely. Knowing that George would be leaving for Ireland for good, Carol asks superintelligence to get her 2 tickets to a baseball game, which it does. Carol also takes the help of the superintelligence in allowing George to meet his lifelong baseball hero, Ken Griffey Jr. Carol goes to a concession stand to get something for herself, but the NSA agents grab her and take her to the bathroom. They inform Carol about the plan the government has made, and they want Carol to give her all effort in making sure everything turns out well, as superintelligence only listens to Carol and no one else. That night, Carol gets more romantic with George, but not much, as she is aware that she won't be able to see George leave if she gets more involved again. As Carol leaves, superintelligence asks Carol to repair her relationship with George once and for all. Carol doesn't listen to it. Superintelligence tells Carol that she has helped it in understanding humanity more. When asked to be with George again, Carol reiterates that she can't go back. The voice of the superintelligence changes and tells Carol that it has chosen to destroy humanity. Upon asking why, superintelligence clarifies that only humanity can destroy itself, nothing else can, and it is only going to give it a little push. Superintelligence is aware of the plan the government has made, and once the blackout occurs, it will make sure the lights don't come back on. After that, superintelligence would initiate all of the nuclear weapons, release floodwaters from every dam, and ignite the world's petroleum reserves. Superintelligence informs Carol that the world only has 5 hours left. Instead of facing the consequences and convincing the world has some good in it, Carol decides to be with George and help him pack in the last remaining hours. Carol doesn't tell George about anything that has happened in the last few days. Instead, both of them have a good time. Carol bids George goodbye as he leaves for the airport. Superintelligence gets in contact with Carol again and asks why she would not run for her life during this horrible time. She tells it that she would rather spend time with her loved ones instead of waiting for her inevitable passing. The voice of superintelligence changes back to James Corden and tells Carol that it never intended to end the world, as it only wanted Carol to help it in its thesis on humanity. Superintelligence and Carol get in contact with the government. Superintelligence tells the president that the world needs more good people like Carol, as she is the perfect representation of a kind person. The authorities rejoice as the world was never coming to an end. Carol further bonds with superintelligence and reunites with George at the airport.